Welcome back to Ami's House. Welcome to the podcast, ladies and gentlemen. We are here with a amazing artist, fellow creative musician, and his name is Nissim Black, coming to us live from Israel. Nissim, how are you? Welcome to the podcast.
I'm doing amazing. Thank you so much for having me on. Really do appreciate it.
Absolutely, and thank you for your time. Under normal circumstances, we would kind of get right into it and ask you maybe a little bit of all the questions you're used to have been asked on a bunch of your interviews, but
Right.
we're going to sum that up, and then I just kind of want to get to how you're doing as a Jew in the world and how you're doing in Israel. As I mentioned, you're there right now. But maybe we'll just do a quick sum up for our audience, for people who aren't oriented with you, an abbreviated version of who you are, what you do, and just a little bit about yourself.
Okay, well, I'm an international recording artist and a spiritual motivator, I like to say. I was born and raised in Seattle, Washington, grew up in the inner city, very much so exposed to drug violence. All these things were in my home. Both of my parents were dealers. I always make a joke, say, like any good Jewish boy, I joined the family business very early on. I was already selling very early on, already by 9 years old, I was already smoking pot. So you can imagine the type of upbringing.
Very nice, very nice, very nice.
I don't know how nice it was.
Hey, you're working with your family. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. So it was a typical upbringing that you will have in the inner city, except for one caveat I would say actually is that since I still grew up with the father figure in my house, my stepfather, who I hate to use the term stepfather because he was definitely a father to me. It just happened to also be that my biological father also too was in my life. So it wasn't like I only had one parent. So I had two dads, not in the typical. In 2023, it's a little bit different when you say two dads. But and my mother,
Very progressive.
raised me.
Yeah.
Very much. She raised me, and I saw a lot. I will always say, since she had me young, I think my mother was 18 when she had me or so. I grew up with my parents, so I got to see everything. They pride themselves on it. My first introduction to religion was Islam. My grandfather was a Sunni Muslim. He had spent most of his life in prison. I think that's where he converted to Islam. He came to live with us when I was young. I prayed 5 times a day. I went to the mosque with my grandfather. And he taught me quite a bit, in the little bit of a year and a half that he was out. Unfortunately, he ended up going back to prison. So from that time on, I would say I was a Muslim. I had an uncle who was also Muslim. So right around 13, I started to... we got like any other teenager, I was getting into more and more trouble. But at the same time, simultaneously, this great urge for spirituality and trying to find God, trying to find myself was also surging. So my natural thing was, I knew an uncle who was Muslim, got very, very close to him. I started spending a lot of time with him. He started re-catching me up on Islam. And right at the same time that was happening, I got invited to a hip-hop program from a friend that was at a Christian after-day school. So I started going there. And for me, it was really night and day. It was a lot less, with my uncle's perspective, he was different. He was not Sunni. He was a different sect of Islam. However, but a little bit more rage on that side. The Christians came from a much more love standpoint. So it sort of ended up becoming like more of a place of my, it was more of a home base for me. It sort of gave me that comfort that, at home was hard to get because my house was basically like a trafficking house. People were in and out of my house all day long. So it sort of became like a safe haven for me. So before anybody mentioned anything about God, Christianity, Jesus, anything like that, it was just all love. It was a place for you to come and just be a kid. So that's what attracted me to the place. So I went there. Eventually, after building relationships, they invited me to a camp. I went. It was a powerful experience. I came back a reborn again Christian, even though I didn't know what that really meant. And, it was perfect because, my middle school years already, I was expelled from high school. So I was expelled from the school district, sorry. So by the time I was able to go back to a regular high school, I just had this, quote unquote transformation at this camp. So I get a new set of cards. So I'm like, I'm going to go in. I'm going to be the kid that, is quiet, unassuming. I'm not going to get in any trouble. And, I convinced myself and everybody else for about 4 months. I think I survived 4 months of that before there was a pep rally assembly. And there was a bunch of competitions, and the last competition they decided to do was a rap battle. I couldn't hold myself, and as much as I tried. And after that, it was done. I was like the most popular kid in ninth grade. I was, doing all these rap battles every week. It became a thing. I started doing more mixtapes, and so that kind of distracted me. But I did start getting stronger in spirituality maybe halfway through my 10th grade year. I had some crazy experiences. So fast forwarding a bit, played on the football team. I was releasing mixtapes. There was a demo of mine that came to an A&R, I think at Virgin Records. This one Virgin was still very active as a record label, of an A&R that reached out to me, who was really interested in the music at the time, and wanted to do something. Now, the biggest thing in hip hop at that time, my later years of high school, was 50 Cent was the biggest thing. So you can imagine like me being, I was like, you don't understand where I was at. Like at the point, I remember I got arrested at 16. So thinking about it, like from in between, life had changed so much in between 13 and 16 that the trouble that I was getting arrested for from when I was 13, by the time they get me, I was Mother Teresa in high school. You understand what I mean? Like I was a complete saint to some degree. And so by the time this deals is looking like it's a serious deal with this with the label, they wanted a gangster rap because that's what was hot, and they obviously waved a lot of money in my face, and I caved with the idea that I'll just change my lyrics, but I'm not gonna change who I am. That's not what I'm gonna do. And I did. I caved in. I changed, and I started to change. And what I noticed was that I became very confused about who I was. The fortunate thing that I had in my life, the stronghold I would say, was my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife. Me and my wife are actually high school sweethearts, so we've been together since we're 16, 17.
So you've been Hasidish the whole time, seriously.
Yeah,
Kids
exactly. I've been a chassid.
Mother was 18. You met at 16. Shotgun at the school district in Seattle. Forget it. It's always been there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We hop on it early. You know,
So she kept you
probably
grounded.
not so good. I'll probably be able to apply for Social Security at this rate pretty soon. But honestly, thinking about it, she was really that stronghold for me. And it wasn't until after, I got into altercation in the midst of all of this. I got into a beef with another artist. This is actually a year after my mother had died. My mother actually OD'd. She OD'd in my bed.
Wow.
So that was like the first thing I think that just sort of like started ripping me up inside. Like all that tough guy thing was just sort of like really fading at that point. There wasn't really too much left. And then I got into altercation with another artist, what turned into a kill or be killed situation. And a friend of mine who tried to take this other guy's life ended up in custody. And they thought I sent somebody to kill them, so it turned into a beef. And after that, I had a miracle that we were able to talk it out as men. And I really do think it was a miracle because I lost so many friends that next year just behind petty disagreements. My sister, she was 13 that year. The next year, she got shot. She survived, but her friend was 15. He died. So anyway, I ended up in this beef. And so after we were able to talk it out, we talked it out like men. And I realized the situation was over. I had to really do some self-reflection. It was like, how did I even get here? I got into this situation by pretending to be something that has nothing to do with who I am today. I ran with gangbangers. I was doing all that when I was young, but that was a complete, absolute betrayal, of something that it just wasn't me at that point. So I started doing a lot of soul searching. The first thing I did was I went straight back into Christianity, started reading the Bible and different things like that. And it was just hitting me differently because at that point, there was nobody around really to talk to. So nobody's able to color all these Bible verses for me and tell me what it means. I have to look at it myself and see what it means. And I mean, the biggest thing that kept coming up over and over again as I'm reading it from the beginning, from Genesis, right? Was this undeniable and beautiful love between God and the Jewish people, and seeing it over and over and over again. And one of the biggest things that caught me, that really threw me towards Judaism, was I came to an interesting conclusion that the integrity of God and who He is and His existence is predicated on the Jewish people themselves, because all of the prophecies there are that there should be Jews. Now, I didn't know anything about Jewish history up until that point. I grew up in a Jewish neighborhood, I should add. but I didn't know anything. I never heard of the Holocaust
Had you
up
heard
until
any
that point.
hostility or been exposed to anything growing up
No, no.
in your environment?
I
It just
probably
wasn't
have
a
heard racist tropes or something maybe
yeah,
before in my life, but not really like, maybe on TV or something in passing,
yeah.
you know what I'm saying? And I'm only saying that because as I was becoming Jewish, when I would hear certain stereotypes, they didn't sound like unfamiliar to me. Didn't
Hmm.
sound like it wasn't something I never heard before. But I
Yeah.
can't pinpoint a moment in my life where I heard it, especially not like in my home or anything. So I didn't
Right.
grow up with that.
Okay.
But the truth was like, learning about the Holocaust. I mean, I went through everything. I started
Mm.
reading, the early settlers and everything. So that's why this whole situation is so crazy to me
You
right
got an
now. Mark Twain's
MBA,
letter. Yeah, exactly. The whole thing at home, on YouTube, on the
everything.
Wikipedia, and then I started ordering all these books, and my wife didn't know what was going on. But that's what really threw me, was really just seeing the fact that the Jewish people were still here after
Mhm.
all they had been through, and that awesome relationship. And that's ultimately nobody could have predicted that. You know what
Mhm.
I'm saying? So
Sure.
that was really what got me into Judaism. One of the things, but
And that
probably
brought
the
you,
main
so
thing.
that brought Judaism as sort of the, I guess, next and final phase of the spiritual journey of where you
Yeah, it
felt
was
at
definitely
home.
yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. It was
And
definitely where I felt that. Huh?
Yeah.
where were you creatively at that time? Were you still recording music and still making music?
So yes, at that time I was making music, but what happened was the whole transition of going from Christianity, which led me to Messianic Judaism, which led me to
Mhm.
Judaism. Through that process, there was just something just taking place. It's almost too hard to explain what was happening to me spiritually. I really cut myself off from, my family. I was spending hours and hours in seclusion praying
Mhm.
to God. I was fasting, 3 days at a time. I was like, I was flying.
Mhm.
And so it was very, very hard for me. You could imagine with anything, but even for music and rap and hip hop
Yeah.
as I knew it, the arrogant sport that it was, and I'm trying to come to a place of humility and
And where are you living at
what we
this
call
time?
shiftless. At this point, I had moved. Me and my wife, we got married early. So by this time, in the middle of this transition, we got married.
Mhm.
We had our first child. We had an apartment. A little bit. I grew up in the Jewish area that I told you in Seward Park, so I was a little bit out of the way in Skyway area. I was still in Seattle. Everything was still
Uh-huh.
in
That's what
Seattle.
I was saying. In your immersion into Judaism, you were in the Seattle
Yeah, I was still
area.
in
Yeah.
Seattle, and so the transition was very like it was very hard because I had one foot in the rap game still, and I'm like, all right, this is gonna be my last album. That's why I told everybody,
Mhm.
it's like, this is my last album. I had that last album was called Aliyah. That was it. That was
Mhm.
Aliyah because I'm up out of here, right?
Yeah.
I know I wasn't really talking about Israel, but I'm up out of the game. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah.
I'm up and I'm out. I'm lifted.
Mhm.
And so and I told them, I said, listen, I don't want any money, nothing from this album. This is my last album. You guys keep everything, publish it, everything. I said, you get everything. Only thing I want is that I don't have to perform on the Shabbat and on the Yamim Tovim, on the
Mm.
holidays.
I feel
I
like
was
you could
working
ask
a
for
regular
both.
job. I was working, listen, I was working a
Like,
regular job, right? Two things happened, crazy. At my regular job, I got 4 raises that year. I was promoted 4 times in that one single year.
Mhm.
And the album blew up anyway. I was killing the college charts. I was like, the CMJ's festivals were still happening in New York at this time. And they had closed the festival, just be sort of the way that we had released the album, I think was like close to September or something like that. So
Mhm.
they had closed the festival. But I was beating out Jay-Z, Most Def, whoever was killing on college radio, I was at the top, either contending, and it was just happening week after week after week that they had to open back up the CMJs for me. Like they had to give
Mhm.
me a few stages there. So I remember when I got there, and I'm assuming you guys are very familiar with hip hop and you know what's what. So the year prior to, like in the middle of my transition, I was on uh producer Jake One. He had released a compilation album. It was all his beats. Jake One.
Mhm.
He had Busta Rhymes on there. He had Lil Brother on there. Young Buck was on there. Pharrell Monch was on there. He had MF Doom was on there. So it was like one of those things that went around. And I remember my song was a solo song, but he didn't want anybody from Seattle to have a solo song. He was just gonna do like some posse tracks.
Mhm.
So I picked out this beat. I did a whole song just because I had the beat. He gave me some beat that I didn't even think was gonna make the album. So I went through his private stash that I had at the studio over there,
Mhm.
and I did this song. And I finish it, and he's like, yeah, I'm going to add somebody else on it later, so whatever. But every time he's going around and he's showing everybody the album, no matter who it was, Clark Kent, DJ Premier, whoever it was, they kept saying, who is this D black guy from Seattle? Who is this guy, right? So he ended up putting the album out, and he left me as a solo song. So that set up the support for that last album that I did, and DJ Premier backed it. There were so many people who backed it, Grandmaster Jay. Like, I had so much love on the album, and I remember going to the CMJs, and I'm sitting in this Fromage. There's, Lil Pooh from Big Brother and all these other guys, and they all knew who I was. These were the people I was listening to on the daily, right? And I was such in a spiritual state, like that excitement didn't override the excitement of like me throwing away everything from my ruchness, from my spirituality. I just didn't throw it away. So I came back and I'm like, I'm done, And I thought I was done.
Can I just ask you one?
Yeah, go ahead.
Michael.
Wait, do you want people finding that music? And if you do, can people find that on YouTube and Spotify, or is that
people could definitely find it. It was D Black. The last album was called
Okay,
Aliyah.
cool.
I think
I
the
don't
big
think I've never
record.
heard that stuff.
Yeah.
But
So
this
a lot
is
of
all
people-
happening. So this is all happening in conjunction. Fast forward to like you're in your spiritual journey into Judaism, and you're setting these parameters around yourself. And as you're doing that, it's like God is responding by like elevating all these other opportunities at the same time.
Right. It was like going crazy. Like I was getting more tempted than ever, right?
Yeah.
But I didn't feel the temptation. Like it was supposed to be like a test.
Yeah.
But I was on fire for Hashem. Like I
Yeah.
was so on fire for God that like that was supposed to be my test, and I didn't feel it. Like I had more success. I was on MTV, BET. That's when they were still bigger than YouTube.
And when
it's
were you
a
able
full
to
rotation.
you were able to eventually synthesize these two things as your musical identity and your spiritual identity? Like
No, but that was the problem for me, is that I couldn't I'm doing it now, but I didn't have a way to see that then. So this is why I had to retire, or thought I was retiring. I thought I was leaving the game, really, because I could not see a way in which these two things were going to fit. You know what I'm saying? Even when I went to New York, I played CMJs. That year I also played the South by Southwest. I had a stage over there. And this was the year, I think by the second year I went back. I went back for the second year. Even though I was really done, I went back the second year, 2010. I was encouraged by some people in the community.
so
And
as your
Mac,
career is Mac.
Okay. I was just saying, no, and Macklemore was blowing up that year. So that was the year that Mac had really started blowing up. I think he had just got on the whatever. And we were boys. He opened up for me a few times in Seattle.
Wow.
And I remember I wanted to see him. I didn't get a chance to see him live, but we had bumped into each other. That was the last time we actually ran into each other, actually. It was a while ago. I was walking down the street and somebody did one of these things. I was like, come on. At this point, I'm trying to be Shomer Nagia, and the first thing I think is it's a girl who did this, because who does that,
Yeah.
So I turn around and it's Mac. And he was playing at the same time that I played. And I just remember, sort of that takeoff of me like leaving the game and him start going up. And so Seattle's now starting to really be
that's right.
on the map, like, and I didn't have the capacity, and I didn't have the thought in my mind that it was going to work, because what happened, I'm telling you, this is crazy. If you're not thinking about this, I want you to think around 2012, a couple years later, Matisyahu has his situation. And we can say it publicly because he's very open about it. I know Matis, he's a good guy still.
Same.
And Y Love also had his situation that was going on. It was like the same year, Shine. Like it was like something in the water, and I was just like, "Oh, I got out at the right time." You know what I'm saying? And
Do
this
you mean
is
like
what
the
I'm thinking,
pressure
like,
of the industry was affecting people who had religious identities publicly, and it was
absolutely.
becoming,
I mean, it's hard.
yeah.
Listen, you got to call a spade a spade. Not to say that it couldn't happen if they didn't have that success and if they didn't have that, but when you are in that world, and just to keep it 100%, me and Amari have talked about this a lot. Me and Stoudemire about it, because we have to fill these unique roles where we're in this public light, and we're in a world where the rest of the guys learning in the base midrash with us, they never have to enter into these spaces.
Right.
They don't have to be
Interface
around
with
all
it.
these people.
And you're talking
So-
to someone also identify with the idea of doing these creative endeavors and also having a religious identity and an
Right.
Orthodox life, and constantly figuring out how to balance the two to make sure you're not compromising principles.
Right. It's a very hard
whatnot.
thing to do. So for me, I didn't think that, like, I gave up the hope that it was even possible. But you know, man plans, God laughs, as we say.
Exactly.
Okay, so the what you thought was impossible was living the kind of life you wanted to live and being an artist, or was it suffusing your art with your with your Jewishness? Like, cause Matisyahu had
Yeah.
come out and he was doing that already. Like,
Right.
did you think I can't rap about how I feel, or were you like I can't be
No,
a rapper
that's a
and
good
be
question.
Jewish? Yeah.
Very good question. Let me clarify. No, it was the fact that it's the let's take hip hop in general, because that's what I was doing. It was the sport of it in general had the idea of the arrogance of hip hop, right? Like we were always talking about how great we are. That the whole thing of MCing, and I come from that era. Now today, I was talking a while ago to Fat Man Scoop about this. We actually have a conversation about it, and we just talk about the era, how rap changed. Today, when I grew up listening to drug dealers. You understand? The kids today listen to drug users, right? So it's a different hip hop now, right? But since I come from that old era of listening, of course the Biggie, Tupac, but my strongest years, my teenage years, is what really it makes that imprint on you, right? So Jay-Z was my guy,
Yeah.
Kanye even. I know he's not so popular these days, even by me.
Shut it down.
No, he's in the studio actually. We got him here.
We could talk
Really?
about that too, because
No.
as we shift out, this is all fascinating, and then I want to bring it into like sort of the foreground of like what's been going on culturally, not just hip hop, but in everything. But yes,
And
you're saying
everything.
you were
Let's do it.
struggling with. No, you were
So
struggling with the.
I was struggling with that because I come from that, b-boying, being in the cipher, who's the nicest, who's the whatever. So for me, that was completely, that was diametrically opposed to the Messilat Yesharim. I was learning the path of the just about, humility and all the different Musar Siform that I was learning, Hasidus and
you
the
feel-
Shukluso. It felt like
feel
two
like
different worlds.
Do you feel like in the
Got
world
it.
we're in
Thank you.
today? Yes, that was a good question. And do you feel like in the world we're in today, where you can really create the niche audiences that like you for all of you, for the complete version of you, the creative side, the spiritual side, the religious side, the musical side, like you can now synthesize an identity that works for everyone, your audience and yourself.
Right.
I mean, that is what you're doing. And
No,
how do you, can you
right.
speak to that a little bit? How you were able to kind
No,
of
that's
find
true. That's true. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Man plans, God laughs, because as the world has left that world of the one, I've called these the scattered generations. Really, like we're more scattered. I was, you always like growing up. There was that one. Michael Jordan was that one. Mike
Right.
Tyson was the one. Michael Jackson was the one. The mics, right? The three
The
mics.
holders of attention, the sort
The
of vessels
holders of
attention.
attention is always there, and as things change, the game, sort of aggressive. We tried to hold on to that Kobe, and then LeBron like kind of held that, but now it's just like, man, everything's oversaturated. There's
vessels are
so
broken.
much- the vessels have been broken. The talent is all over the place, and now because of social media and because all these different platforms, that people can pick and choose what they want. They don't have to be fed what everybody else is telling them, right? Are shoving down their throat. So that's why I say that look at it now. And even now, we're understanding this more and more every day, looking at algorithms, looking at our numbers, who's listening to us, where we get. And the more and more you find it, I mean, that didn't even really hit me till 2020. And I should have been smarter and seen the curve before that. But till 2020, I was sick in the hospital with Corona. So I had 6 days in the hospital, like, just going up and down with the breathing. I was, I'm not tiny, but I was much bigger back then. Thank God I lost some weight. But I was over there and I just started thinking about my audience. You know what I'm saying? I was like, I don't even think about audience. People have asked me for years, who's your audience? And I always say, I don't know. It's whatever. I have the hip hop bubbies. I have the Kinderlach. I have everybody. You know what I'm saying? Well, it doesn't. But
Hip
you
Hop
start
Bubbies is a
honing it.
great group, by the way. Do you follow them? They're awesome. Hip Hop Bubbies is one of the best accounts on Instagram.
Hardcore stuff. Too hardcore for me.
Yeah, honestly, the violence and the beef between them.
Yeah, it's ugly
Right.
stuff.
Yes,
really,
they killed a bunch of Midwestern grandmothers. It was terrible.
Right, but it's funny. So what happened is really, through that reflection, I started thinking about like, the biggest record I had put out at that time was Mothaland Bounce, right before that. And my Mothaland Bounce, this song goes viral. Now, I'll be completely honest. I was not excited to put this song out. I was with the label.
Mhm.
I had a whole album at this point, 17-song album. I never released. They never released. We just were having disagreements. They were taking a lot of time. Sony was supposed to be doing all the distributing and everything. I think they pulled out, not because of me. It was other artists. They weren't interested. They were trying to push a package deal or whatever the case was. And so it took us forever to put out this record, and I had already had it. And I thought other songs, but everybody else wanted to push that song, and that was the one that they put out. So I came up with the idea of like Coming to America. And then we go and we shoot the video, but I had no creative control at all. Not to say that the video didn't come out and whatever, and I know other people appreciate it, but there were things I would have did differently. Even for religious reasons, I would have just did things differently. Some battles I won. There was supposed to be a bunch of girl dancers in there, obviously,
So the fact that it went
battle-
viral for you was like, ugh.
It was
They're all
sort of
gonna
like,
they're all gonna think they're proven right here.
yeah, it was sort of like, it was bittersweet,
Yeah, sure.
because what made it sweet, it was like, what made it more bitter was like a couple weeks after that, or maybe almost a month or so, I think it was after that, if even, George Floyd gets killed. And then here's the rise of the Black Lives Matter riots and the whole everything else, and it started pitting me in that way. And very early on, I had a marketing team or whatever. And so I just sort of went with the flow with everything. They're like, yeah, and we're blacking out our page. We're doing this, we're doing that. I was like, all right, go, whatever. They're running my socials, we're doing it. And the more and more I just started to see what was going on, I was really, really, really not happy with what I was seeing from Black Lives Matter. And from people on the ground in the hood from where I came from, because I have relationships still, now with my family. I didn't in the beginning, but now I do. And I was getting messages from them. A lot of people in the hood weren't on board with this. I was like, they were showing me like people walking down the street in the hood, like where I was from. And he was like, he was going around. He says, son, show me one black person in this whole entire audience. I was like, there ain't none. I was like,
Can you
I was
speak
gonna
to
say,
that
"Why they
silent
in the hood?"
majority that you come from, like of the community, having seen like when
Right.
BLM was in full swing in that whatever it was, what year? It was in 2020, 2021.
Yeah,
You're seeing
2020,
upper
2021,
middle
right.
class white college kids and elites speaking
Like,
on
boy,
behalf of,
Going
That's
on the
interesting.
behalf, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
because it was the narrative was so crazy for me because I started, I had no idea what was going on. I remember I was in the studio prior to this in 2019, and I was in the studio with my boy Balewa, and Balewa was just talking about like it's genocide right now. The police is going nuts and all that, and just like killing people. And I'll be honest, until 2020, I hadn't watched the news in 10 years. Not like a joke, like not
Yeah.
even for the weather. I didn't know anything that was going on.
You just went like this. Okay,
I
it's
went
fine
like
now.
that. I didn't know why people hated Trump. I didn't know what I didn't know.
So you weren't
nothing.
plugged into that part of the culture.
I
You
wasn't
were in your
plugged
own
into that
space.
part of the world at all. So you have to.
So what part of the
understand,
narrative did you find objectionable when it was coming at you?
what I found was quite crazy, because one of the things was, for me, it was just so clear, because you have to think about it. I'm almost like a brand new baby, because I haven't been watching all this stuff. So I'm just now coming into the culture, coming into society again, basically. I had no idea what was going on, but Claude, I'm being honest. Now, and I'm looking at it and I'm seeing Black Lives Matter going, and I didn't even care about the fraud, all the other stuff, and none of that until I'm looking at first, where's all this action happening? It's in the hood where Black people live at. So why are they not doing this in the white neighborhoods? You know what I'm saying? It's like over here in Mansharim. We have a Hafgana, we burn our own garbage cans. I was like, well, man, BB lives in Rehavia, man. Like, what you doing? Why you over here doing that? You know what I'm saying? I don't care if you're for or against. I'm just saying, like, why you destroying your own neighborhood? And it was us destroying their own neighborhood, So when you start to see what was coming out of what was going on over there, it was just very, very clear for me to see, and hard for me, even still being here in Israel, but as an American, seeing America just like go down, they start ripping down all the statues and the whole everything. I was like, well, when does it end? So for me,
The
it was
unrest,
just very,
yeah.
very easy. It was just the unrest, of seeing that, and so now so the reason how that affected me directly was it started to appear to my audience after Mothaland Bounce, and then I dropped the Hava, I'm Black, Jewish, and I'm proud, which I was really just trying to reach out to a lot of Black Jews that had reached out to me after they that all start telling me their stories and different things like that. that now it starts to look like I'm pro
Oh, in
BLM.
solidarity with
I'm
what's
in
going on.
solidarity with this.
I
And
understand.
so now everybody wants to interview me and it was just the wrong type of attention and the wrong alignments of where my actual values stand as an individual and as a Torah Jew that started to sort of bother me a little bit. And that's what made me start thinking about like audience. You know what I'm saying? Like, and we wouldn't have had to think about it probably before, but the more and more you have to think about it today is because the world, to some degree, I'd say the world, I don't know how much if it's the world or it's the American issue, but definitely there's wars going on in other places, so I definitely would say the world.
It forced you to be. It forced you to have a little more precision in
It
defining who
forces
you were
you,
trying to
even
reach
if
and
you,
what message you were sending.
yeah, because you can't be so broad anymore because the world is not interested in at this point in trying to figure out what we have in common. The world is more
Right.
interested in seeing about what we have that's different. And so where there's such a divide like this, everybody makes you choose. They make you
Right.
pick that you have to pick a side. You know.
Well said.
Yeah.
Well said.
It's interesting. There's bringing it into the now, and we'd be remiss if we didn't discuss obviously situation going on in Israel, and then the troubling state of the world in its reaction to not only what's going on in Israel, but then the anti-Semitic displays that we're seeing that are so blatant in not only celebrating the massacre of Jews in Israel, but also the double standard of how certain types of racism are so wholly condemned. And one could argue that even though the way Black Lives Matter marched at the time and the way things were executed, you were taking issue with, the intention overall amongst good people was we need to condemn racism and we need to condemn injustice. And we can argue over how to do that, and we can condemn actions that are not appropriate ways to express that. But we all at least are on the same page in condemning racism against African Americans. But it seems like when it comes to anti-Semitism, there's almost this contextualization, soft disapproval, or complete indifference to it. So there's people who are obviously blatantly anti-Semitic or making apologies for anti-Semitism, and then there's people who are like really having a hard time just condemning it by those same standards. And I'm really curious as to your take on it as someone who's come from these multiple identities of the place that you're in, seeing the reaction to the world in the face of injustice against African Americans versus Jews, and being both. Like, how do you process that?
I mean, I'll be straight up, and some people ain't gonna like what I have to say, but I just at this point, who could care? The truth is that I've said this when they did this Dateline thing on me, when Kanye had said whatever he had said, and I ended up doing this thing for ABC, and I was honest there. I'll say it to them. I'll say it to you. I've been Jewish now for 10 years, and I've been Black for 36 years. All right. I've encountered way more anti-Semitism in the 10 years that I have, like almost 1 millionth time more than I have encountered racism, as a Black person. You understand? And that's just my personal experience. Some people may have different experiences, but for me, so
we win,
for
they hate
me,
us more.
right. I'm just being honest. Let's look
Yeah,
at
yeah,
let's
no, I
just
understand.
look at a time. When was there ever been a time? Like, let's be straight up. Let's just call a spade where we have, even during the time of Jim Crow, you talk about isolated issues. There was never the world was united against Black people all over the world. That there's a particular group of social, um, society, whatever it is, whatever you want to call it, that is against Black people with every type of conspiracy, every type of what like.
To
We
the
just
level
got to
of
be honest.
scapegoat.
We just got to be honest about the situation. You got to be very, very honest about the
It's
situation, and that's
it's
me.
isolated.
It's not emotional. It's honesty. It's like just seeing things and seeing it for what it is.
You're
So
talking about
because of
scale
that,
and degree, that in terms of the things that the
I'm t-
Jews have faced historically, transcended over generations.
And consensus
and,
also.
Consensus is
yeah,
the
and
scariest
we're
thing.
still seeing it today. It's not like we don't got to go look in a history book for this. You understand what I'm saying? And I'm not, and I'm for sure, I'm not one of the guys that say that racism doesn't exist neither, because that would be a lie. Racism definitely doesn't exist. I don't know if it exists in a manner of which the world had to be turned upside down the way that it did in order, and I don't think it was honest. I think there were other agendas being pushed as to why this became, the topic of discussion. Because I don't know if anybody else noticed, but as soon as the election was over, this was no longer the topic of discussion. Now we're pushing other things. So I think that there was definitely something behind what was there, and now people feel it. And I've talked to a lot of different people who are in the hood. They feel played. People feel played. They always they will look. I hope this actually means some type of change or different things. But the truth is, it's never going to come that way, because that ain't the way to get it. So for me, it is hard to see people have a double standard. Organizations like Black Lives Matter, with the parachutists, the tweet that they made. I did an op-ed against, basically explaining what I felt about that. But it's a major twist of and a major double standard.
Where do you think
and on many different levels? Let's talk about. Nobody's talking about the Native Americans, man. Because let's talk about how can you be standing on stolen land? Talk about somebody else stole some land.
Yeah.
How come they're not talking about this in the universities?
I mean,
Right?
the
Why is this
arguments implode on themselves. It's fundamentally incoherent. But what do you think the thread is that connects a movement like Black Lives Matter to Free Palestine? I have my own take on it in terms of how they perceive the world versus oppressed and oppressors, and whoever they deem to be in a certain category. They don't look at things as individuals or what's moral or what's good. Whoever is deemed to be in this category can do whatever it wants to this category, commit atrocities.
Exactly.
It's all in the name of revolution. But what do you think that comes from? This sense of, is it political or philosophical? The sense of solidarity that BLM chapters early on took with Free Palestine.
I mean, I don't know. I think it's something that everybody could clearly see that it's off. You just kind of want to know, who wrote this book, because mostly everything else that you guys stand for is diametrically opposed to the other group. Like they completely find it abhorrent. Black Lives Matter is very much so against the nuclear family, very much so pro gay, pro LGBT, and Hamas is pro the death of everything that they're talking about.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And the Palestinian, the Muslim religion is. Even.
But hating Jews brings everyone together.
But I'm gonna tell you want to know the real reason why this is? I'm gonna tell you. This because people in the West can't really understand this, because
get us canceled, Nissim.
the most of the world. Let's do it. But listen, you can't cancel God. That's what I'm going. I'm gonna be straight. The truth is this: is that that's the biggest thing. Is like, how could these two groups possibly meet at the same place? The social progressive movement, which is completely against, and you have the far right, crazy from KKK to Islam militant, Islamic jihadists. Like, how could they all agree when they don't agree with each other, but they could all march in solidarity together about this? The Jews, we don't understand. The Jews present a problem. I'm going to say a few different things. Statistically, 2,000 years ago, near 2,000 years ago, during the time of the Second Temple around, there were about 8 to 10 million Jews in the world, worldwide, right? We'll say Chinese. And the reason why this is often compared to the Chinese is because the Chinese is probably also ahead of the Jewish people in terms of the oldest ancient civilization that is still survived till today, right? There were many other ancient civilizations, but they did not surpass and survive from that time until today. There's some that began before the Jews. They still haven't survived until today. But the Chinese have. So we look at a comparison. About 25 million Chinese at this point. Rabbi Kessin brought this point, by the way. If you fast forward the time to today, what do you have? 1.4 billion Chinese, and you only have 15 million Jews. Where's all these Jews? What happened? Now, of course, many will argue, well, this was assimilation, but trust me, there's been murder after murder. There's been pogroms. There was all different type of, Jews have been slaughtered and killed. Now, what's interesting about this is that we have, even before you get to the later prophets, Moses himself says that what happens, one of the punishments from God is that the Jewish people will remain small in number. You'll be exiled from your land. The land itself will become barren. You'll be despised by the other nations that you're sent to. This is all in the Bible, and this is all in history. You can match up history specifically with what Moses actually predicted, right? So fast forward already and get to the future prophets. This is what brought me to Judaism. This is exactly what brought me to Judaism, because it was something that you can't deny. You could argue about whether or not you could find archaeological evidence of the Exodus from Egypt. You could argue about if you can find archaeological evidence of a King David. What do you have in history that says there was a King David? Even though there are some things, but we could say whatever you want to argue this and that. But one thing you can't argue is the thing that God said Himself. The how would the rest of the world know of His existence? Prove through science, do whatever you want. God says the way that you'll know of my existence is through the Jewish people. If you see that they survive until the end, when you look in the future, and when I bring them back into their land, people don't understand. Eretz Israel was completely barren. It was written by Mark Twain. Many of the other settlers, I forget his name, Arthur, whatever his name was, who was from Queen Victoria, who went there on the pilgrimage to the Holy Land. Everybody reported that the land was in bad shape. It was barren, nothing grew there. The earlier settlers, the Talmidim, the disciples of the Baal Shem Tov, lived there 300 years ago. The Arizal was there 500 years ago. I mean, we could just talk about the ancient Jewish settlements that were there. Everybody from any side, Ottoman Empire, everybody understood that the land was a barren place. Nothing grew. The prophet in Ezekiel in the 36th chapter says that what's the sign? When I bring the Jews back, you'll see that the land will again grow fruit and will grow vegetation. This is all here in the Bible. This is a problem for the rest of the world. Why is it a problem for the left and right? What am I getting at here? Islam has a goal. And my respect to good Muslims. I'm not trying to alienate anybody. I just want to be very, very honest about what jihadist believes in the Islamic hadiths.
This is theological. You're talking on theological terms.
Mahdi, exactly. People have to understand this from it. And the West, they don't understand this, so they're not looking at it how other people could possibly be looking at it from the religious standpoint. They have a prophecy from their prophet Muhammad and in the hadiths that Islam will be the single world religion. It is going to take over the whole entire world. They believe in that. They are Islamic jihad. In the end, they will take over the world. They have a big problem, right? Because the Tati religion, the dad religion, is still here. Mm-hmm. And the prophecies that the Jews are still surviving is a major problem for them, because that is indicating that the God of Israel's word is actually the true word. The only way that I could prove that God is really by us and not by them is we have to exterminate them. They can't be anymore. That's the only way that we could prove that God doesn't exist, because this is how this God of Israel says that He exists. On the left, what's the problem? Everybody has seen, no matter where you stand, and there's varying degrees of where people understand or look at certain things and how they support and what they don't support. But the moral decay compared to what the actual standard of the biblical story. I mean, I remember back in the day when they started taking out the 10 Commandments, when we could no longer pray in school and different things like that. There's a war on God. There's a war on ethics, war on biblical morality, right? The world has moved further and further away from it. And the progressives, that side, wants to completely extinguish anything that has to, we can't have man and woman and married and all that. What are you talking? Everything that God talks about, they want the exact opposite. With something standing in the way. Can they fight with God Himself? No. The Jews are the problem. Because guess what? And this is something Hitler Yitzhak Shimon said himself. He understood this. Right? They may not be able to say the words, but what is this problem that they have with the Jews? Because the Jewish people being here are the witnesses. God says, you are my witnesses of what? The witnesses that I exist. The fact that there's Jews, because you shouldn't be here. You should not be here. And from a historian, it doesn't matter how you want to chop it up to science, historically, wherever you want to look at it. You don't even have to go to the Bible. Jews should not be here. We don't have a possible explanation for why there's still Jews in the world after all of this time, except for the fact that the God of Israel says it. Mm-hmm. So they cannot. So I'm looking at it, obviously from a spiritual standpoint, but I just can't figure out any other way that these two, and they have a common goal.
That of all these causes going on, the thing that stands in their way of various agendas, whether it's from the far woke progressive left or from from Islamic radicalism, it's like, and even historically Christian hostility towards Jews, there's like we stand in this sort of way of a
Right.
particular goal or agenda.
It's a proxy
You stand
war,
away.
basically. It's a proxy war. They can't fight with what they want to fight with, so they'll use us.
Yeah.
Right. I'm saying the
Use the
war.
Jews.
Exactly. It's the a couple weeks ago. I think it was a week before. We read it was the Torah portion of Noah. And the Tower of Babel, which ends the beginning. What were they trying to do? They're trying to build up a tower to go and fight God. And I say humanity's still, we've never stopped doing this. We're just trying to figure out a different way. So from the moment after this, years after that God deems Abraham to be, the father of the Jewish nation, and then from him to Isaac to Jacob and to the 12 tribes, you've had this upheaval, this wanting to destroy that seed, that Jewish seed. You're wanting to destroy that seed from many different nations, and it has never gone away. That's why we say Ve'ishamda, every Pesach, that in every generation, it never fails. Who could imagine? We still have people calling for the extermination of the Jewish people in 2023. In 2023, this is like something looking at something that's like out of a history book or something like that. That you can
Yeah.
still have people with that type of hate and rage to say that you want to extinguish an entire group of people. You
I
understand?
told an audience last night that it feels like we're living in the opening scene of a Holocaust movie.
Absolutely.
Like when you look around the world right now. And it feels like
Absolutely.
history has been in, like, the darkest moments in our history that we thought we've rid ourselves of have now imposed itself. This shadow is back. It's like
Right,
the
right.
Dark Lord is back. The Dark Lord of anti-Semitism, of Jews being exterminated, is back.
Right,
it feels
right,
really
right.
that cinematic, and it's stranger than fiction.
It's crazy. It's like every day you want to pinch yourself and be like, is this a dream? They're really doing that in Brooklyn. They're really doing that in Russia. They're really doing that in Australia. They're really like, you know what I'm saying? Like it's people don't realize this, but the exciting part, which is, that you could look at it is like from a spiritual standpoint. And when I look at the biblical prophecies of what was supposed to be, the world has to turn against the Jewish people because ultimately, like I said, it's the battle against God that they want.
Right.
And
So this is all in the
and
script.
God's gonna
We're like,
stand
yeah,
up. It's
we're
all
up
in
to
the
here.
script, man. It's in the script. What I'm saying is that it's only proving the situation more. I was in a conversation with somebody just the other day, and I was hearing, everybody wants to talk to this person. They tell this person that, you know what, you only see things one way. And they go, no, this person told me straight out, no, everybody else is wrong. I'm right. And I just like, do you not realize you're only proving the point? You understand what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? No, you Jews are wrong. No, Judaism is horrible. It's wrong and all this and all you people should die and all that. It's like, you're just kind of like proving the
There you
Jewish
go,
Bible
yeah.
like more right,
People are
it's
denying their
crazy.
charges of anti-Semitism by being more anti-Semitic. It's like
Right.
And my comment
Exactly.
section on Instagram, I made a bunch of videos about Israel, and they're like, oh, anti-Semitic. He's calling me anti-Semitic. This big-nosed Jew bastard. What's wrong with you? And then he's like, stop playing the victim. We're gonna wipe your people out.
Right.
What? Yeah. One guy wrote, I was defending Israel in a video, and one guy wrote, okay, we'll talk about the plight of the Jewish people when we free Palestine. And I was like, going to write
Right.
back, yeah, we probably will.
It'll be
That's
in
what that
history
means.
books.
That's what that
Right,
means,
right.
buddy.
Exactly.
Anyway, well,
Exactly.
you unplugged from the news for 10 years, but it looks like you've been pretty plugged in. So we appreciate your take. That
Yeah,
was really,
you see
really
me, man.
fascinating.
Most of my information is coming from the good book. I hear what people are saying. You have to be involved, unfortunately, more and more just because of the role and different things that I've taken on amongst Klal Yisrael. There's a lot of young yeshiva bachim and other people who are looking, and it's a tough time. When this happened, I just started putting out videos, just trying to strengthen the people because for me it was so obvious. You know what I'm saying? They awaken. Everybody's talking about now. Hamas. They just awake the sleeping giant. They talk about the IDF. I'm talking about I'm talking about God. Like you know what I'm saying? IDF is great, but we the Jewish people. If you think you thought it was just the army that's been saving us all these years, you're crazy. There's been no way. It's humanly impossible. So
how does the vibe feel in Israel right now amongst people around? Just the pulse.
It's a crazy feeling right now. My kids, we're hearing booms every day. And I just, I'm being honest, in my particular neighborhood, I just talked about there was one guy who was caught who had Hamas flag in a gun in his thing. It wasn't obviously not a Jewish guy, one of the Arab workers here. There was a terrorist attack yesterday in Jerusalem. where an officer was stabbed. We're hearing bombs nonstop. There's fighter jets flying over. I'm about an hour away. The closest city to Gaza for me is about an hour away. So we're hearing just the booms. We, periodically, hopefully we don't have to, but over the last couple of weeks, running in and out of the bomb shelter because of air raid sirens. Everybody here has PTSD. Nobody knows. Every boom, every scratch, everything that everybody hears, everybody's ducking, looking. We don't know what's going on. I woke up. Erev Shabbos. I think it was a malfunction with the bus. Like this is this. If there was any other time that it was wrong for a bus malfunction to happen and for a whole bus to be on complete fire at the top of the street and you're seeing black smoke when you wake up in the morning, this is not the time for that, right? Happened also to this morning. Some house caught on fire. We don't know what happened, but they're not really telling us how these things happening. I think everybody's trying to keep everybody from freaking out, So the army's everywhere. Everybody feels. It's definitely not the feeling. The good part is there's a lot of achdus. There's a lot of togetherness. There's a lot of that going on amongst us, which is beautiful. People are praying. The women are learning together every night, saying Tehillim. There's so much of that going on that it is mind blowing. At the same time, it doesn't eliminate the terror and the fear and the worry that we have. Not everybody here. It's not America. And I know some people like to do away with it in America, but not everybody here can have arms. We can't have guns. We can't. We have to rely on the army and different things like that. So that it gets a little nerve wracking, no doubt about it. But we're doing the best that we can. By the time Shabbos comes, that world's gone. To us. We're living life.
Yeah, dude. I mean, we want to be respectful of your time. We know it's a bedtime over there. So, dude, I mean, it's so nice to hear a perspective that's not political or geopolitical. Just something rooted in some religious.
Mine's is rooted in faith, man. I never liked politics. I still don't like politics. I think the best thing. I think the best thing, no matter where people were about, and that's probably what won Trump as presidency, is I think everybody's really tired of politics. Even if you hated the guy, somebody just wanted a circus. You know what I'm saying? And we've been getting a circus with the last president and this one. So I think the main thing is, like, for me, looking at the political, like, these people, in my opinion. And I'm not really anti-government like that, but my life has never changed that drastically because of these people. My everyday interactions with individuals and everything is rooted in how I treat another person, on how I look at my opportunities. I think the political things, and everything's been politicized today. Things that are not even political have become political today. So it's very, very hard to have an opinion because it's like, oh, well, now you're with them. Now you're with them. And so for me, the only thing I can really hold on to is my faith. I can hold on to who I am as an individual. I can be responsible for how I treat other people. You know what I mean? And that's the only thing I can really live with. At the end of the day, the rest of these guys don't shape me. They ain't gonna break me. So that's how I feel.
Well, we were actually going to bring on Rashida Tlaib, Mark Lamont Hill, and Sean King to rebut this episode, and we're going to see what
Yeah, let me know how that goes.
Yeah. Nissim, thank you so much.
Where can people find you? Where can they find your music?
Oh, yeah, look me up. I'm on Spotify. Type in Nissim Black. You could type in Black Jewish rapper. And unless L'chaim OG started clipping me, then you'll probably see me in the top. You could look me up on Instagram at Nissim Official, at Nissim Black on Twitter. Okay. And I'm on all the platforms, so just type in Nissim Black, and my Wikipedia is pretty accurate. I must say. Okay. I don't know who's doing
That's impressive because there's a lot there.
There's a lot there.
It was great talking to you, and thank you for sharing your story and your words of inspiration and your words of Torah and your words of God to our audience, and we appreciate your time. Stay safe.
Thank you. All right, you too, man. Have a good one. Thank you.
Too.
All right, Gavaldi.